Finance A, Pension Rate Stabilization Program Trust Resolution. Could we have a staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Mark Uribe. I'm the Assistant Director of Finance for the city. And the item you have before you is part 2 of our two-phased approach to the implementation of a PERS rate stabilization plan trust. This is culmination of about 18 months of discussions and meetings to determine how we want to approach this. So I have a couple of bullet points just to give a little bit of the background. So with the rising PERS pension costs facing all local agencies that participate in the pension plan, a lot of agencies are looking at ways to combat these fluctuations or changes or rising PERS costs, pension costs. So one of the tools available is a rate stabilization plan trust, and that's an irrevocable trust, meaning monies can be placed into it, but can only be used for that specific purpose. We can't change our mind and pull the money back out to use it for construction projects, anything else of a general purpose. Once it's in, it's dedicated to that purpose. And what that does is it helps offset the unfunded actuarial liability, which is the difference between what PERS calculates that we will owe over a period of time, 30 years is their amortization period, and then what we have as far as what we've placed into the system as far as our assets. So there's a little bit of a gap there. When I say a little bit, it's about $35 million, but that's about 30%. We're about 70% funded, which is about average for the local agencies that participate in the CalPERS pension. So what that does is it helps offset the liability. It also demonstrates that we have a plan for funding that unfunded liability, and that gets presented in our financial statements. And the trust has a different set of rules for investments, and that was the phase we did previously, was to adopt an investment policy, which gives us much wider investment options and allows flexibility for higher investment earnings. So what all of those things do collectively is presents a better picture that basically we have a plan for funding this and for becoming sustainable, and that is generally looked upon favorably by credit rating agencies. So those are all things that are a benefit of participating in this trust. So as I mentioned, at the last meeting, first phase was to adopt the investment policy for the trust. At this meeting, we have talked about previously about an initial contribution of about $5 million, and that has been identified as a commitment of general fund balance as of June 30th. Each year we come back and we commit certain portions of general fund balance for specific purposes, that being one of them. And when we had an independent actuary working for us calculate out how quickly we could pay down that unfunded liability, we had a target of about 20 years. And the numbers worked out to where if we did an initial contribution of $5 million right now, in 20 years, all things remaining unchanged, we could pay off that unfunded liability. Now, all things remaining unchanged is not going to happen. There are various components and various variations of assumptions that go into PERS calculation of the liability. But the way we've structured this program is to look at it on an annual basis as part of the budget so that we can then decide on new actuarial information, taking into account any changes that PERS has made with their actuaries calculating out what the liability is going to be and what their earnings are going to be, to come up with different options for how we need to either contribute more to the trust or leave it as is, so that we still have the goal of being 100% funded after 20 years. So the recommended action tonight is to adopt a resolution that approves participation in the trust, to authorize the city manager to execute the trust agreement, and to approve the $5 million appropriation from the general fund committed fund balance to fund the initial contribution to the trust. So that completes my presentation. I'm available for questions, and we have representatives from PARS, the trust administrator, available for questions as well.
And we need to say we did have a study session or two on this, and council discussed it for a couple of hours before. So with that, other questions? Mr. Tremblay.
Just to confirm that the $5 million is part of the $47.5 million projected general fund balance that was committed by the council last meeting per GASB?
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. I have to, just in rhetoric, I have to admit I chuckled a little bit when you said that things can change. I kind of equate PERS with being the character of Lucy in a Charlie Brown cartoon, because I think they just move the goalposts all the time. That's
Any other questions? Mrs. McDonald.
I just want to clarify something, just to make sure I'm remembering right. If in the future a council was in a situation where they needed funds to make their annual contribution, they could draw from this because it's for the purpose of the pensions.
That's
so
correct.
that does have that little bit of an out if the money were, hopefully not, but if it were needed. Okay. And you talk about PERS changing. You know, I remember when we were super funded, so you never know. Maybe it'll go that way again. We'll see.
Who knows?
That was before the stock market crashed, and all what went to heck. But we can. I fully support this. I think it's something we need to do to show that we're trying to manage that and to get ourselves in a position where we don't have that unfunded liability.
Any other questions? Mr. Kildee.
Yeah, Mark, what's the best way to make this payment? Is it to make it directly to PARS? Is it to wait until we get billed? Have we decided how we're going to make this payment?
We would make the initial contribution as soon as we can take it to them as a one lump sum payment. And the plan is to ease that money into the market, not to put it all in at once, but this is similar to what we did with our OPEB trust, is over a period of, I think we did 6 months to gradually ease those dollars into the different various investment vehicles that were part of our investment policy adoption.
Are we going to make that payment directly to PARS, or are we going
Directly
to make it?
to PARS, yes.
And it'll be like a one lump sum payment then?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
A deposit, it's still our money, right?
Correct.
Mr. Morgan.
You know, the way the market's going now, up, down, it's unbelievable. You don't know which way to go if you're investment people out there with our money, because you don't know if it's continue going to go up and earn, more, or is it going to take a dip? So it's good luck.
That's why we have them.
Mr. Tremblay.
Yeah, I'm hoping for good luck too, Mr. Morgan. But I mean, the fact is, depending on what the city earns and depending on what the PERS discount rate is, I mean, that's going to be indicative of whether or not this is successful or not. And one of the things I wanted to ask finance staff, in the report itself, it talks not just about utilizing this trust as a vehicle, but also the potential for accelerating contributions. And I'll just add, as appropriate to PERS to pay down this liability. And I know that I will be asking every time we talk about this, is that option being considered for some accelerated contributions? And we have had many conversations about that and about the advisability of doing it, but I think we need to continue to talk about it, because that is a reasonable thing to talk about in conjunction with doing this. This isn't a panacea as far as I'm concerned. It's a good thing, but it's not the only option.
That's correct. As PERS does an annual actuarial valuation of the PERS program and the costs and their investments that they have towards that pension expense or liability, we have our separate set of actuaries that are calculating on an annual basis as well to make sure that we're still on target for that 20-year 100% funded ratio.
I have one other question.
Mr. Kildee.
Got one other just quick question while you're here. I know this is a relatively new program, so we really don't know what, the percentage interest rates that, we're going to get in the percentages. Is there any, historical data that you're aware of that we know within the 20 years? I know we're hopeful that we'll be able to, if all things remain relatively the same as they are now, but can we expect the interest rate that we accrue to be somewhat contiguous with what's the last 15, 20 years are? Is there?
Since inception with our OPEB program, OPEB trust program, similar concept, we started that in 2009, and we have earned an average of, I believe, close to 8% on that program. Now, again, you always hear the disclaimer that that's not indicative of future performance, but that is the past performance that we've experienced. Now, the program that we're entering into right now has a target of, I think it's 5.6% earnings. So that is kind of the benchmark, the target that we want to achieve. And this is over a 30-year period. So as things change, that's how we adjust when we look at it each year, looking at different variables and looking at new actuarial valuations, whether we need to put more money in or whether we're close enough to meeting our goal.
Okay, thank you.
So what are the wishes of council? Mrs. McDonald?
I would move to adopt a resolution approving participation in the public agency's Post-Employment Benefits Trust, administered by Public Agency Retirement Services, PARS, and authorize the city manager to execute the trust agreement and approve an appropriation from the general fund committed fund balance in the amount of $5 million to the non-departmental account budget to fund the initial contribution to the, it's a long one, to the PRSP Trust.
Second.
The motion and a second. Please vote. Motion carries unanimously.